Hashtag Fix Dehya is a movement being shared by many Genshin Impact players right now in an attempt to get MiHoYo to buff Dehya. Most people are sharing this identical pictures with some 4 easy steps to fix Dehya, which, to be honest, I kind of not necessarily agree. In particular, while I do think that Dehya's number is a problem, I don't think that only buffing the number is the way to go. Perhaps changing the mechanics or reworking certain mechanics will make the character overall just feels a lot better to play, which is what I'd like to talk about today instead. Okay, so I made a PowerPoint today, right? And basically this is effectively like how I would buff Dehya. I'm not even gonna use the word change, I'm gonna use the word buff because we all know she sucks and she needs buff. Just listen, okay? Let me cook, okay? First things first, Dehya is like a tank. I think by now we established Dehya role as a tank, which is, to be honest, kind of cool. It's like a new... Tanking in general is like a new aspect introduced in Genshin Impact as a defensive utility, right? In general, in the past, we have either shield in the case of like Zhongli, which just prevent your party from taking damage, or you have heal, which is like something like Bennett, which heal the damage your party has taken. Both of these were the defensive utility that we have seen in the past to keep your party to survive in the Abyss Chamber. But now we have a brand new mechanism, which is tanking, which is Dehya would choose to actively take the damage instead. Now, originally, I thought this is actually going to be a terrible idea, and I was like, there's no way tanking is ever going to work in Genshin Impact. But to be honest, to be fair to my surprise, it's not necessarily not that bad. And you might have heard me talking about this before in case like Mono Pyro, or even in my first impression video, right? I was like, I think people underrate the overall aspect of tanking because it actually does work out quite nice. Yeah, it doesn't do the most damage, but for some players, damage is not all they care. You know, some people care to have a comfy time. And when a team does work with Dehya, like in the case of Mono Pyro, Dehya as a tank actually do function pretty okay in my personal opinion. You have your elemental skill that damage migrate the damage taken by a party member to Dehya. And then the main objective you do is to put Dehya on field to actively tank the damage. And then her A4 will heal it back up. That's the real thing that Dehya is trying to do, is you have to put Dehya on field. I have seen these videos where like people just put Ocean Heal Climb on Dehya and then AFK and kill a boss, which basically kind of showcase her tanking capability, as in it's really hard to die with the A4 passive. You can just AFK and kill the boss. Now obviously the problem is that this takes 5 years to kill the enemy, and in Abyss you only have 3 minutes, so it doesn't work. But it does showcase how she could potentially function as a tank. With that being said, let's talk about how I'm gonna buff Dehya, right? I think people always get confused, but like buffing a character is not the same as trying to make these characters the most broken or meta-defining characters. We're not really looking for Dehya to be Xiangling 2.0, whatever 2.0, Bennett 2.0. No, people always get confused like, oh, you're trying to make Dehya the most broken character? She's fine. No, first of all, she's not fine. But second of all, no, that's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to make her overall better as a character. We don't have to make her the most broken character in the game, but just hopefully a little bit more playable, like a little bit more quality of life to just let her play a little bit better out. In fact, I think no matter how you buff her, she's not going to be a meta character, but we can still attempt to make her just play overall a lot smoother and better to assist those players who are really looking to play Dehya. I want to lay out some ground rule because I think this is another thing that a lot of people get wrong. Everyone just talk about Dehya's number and how her scaling sucks, and while her scaling is one part of the problem, increasing scaling is not a buff. It is a buff because you do more damage, so the character is better. But increasing scaling is not a real buff. So this is something you should fundamentally steer away from. In theory, you could solve the problem by increasing scaling if you just make her scaling insanely high, insanely broken, to the point where she one-shot every enemy, then she will be a really strong or even broken character. Same thing go for Chi-Chi. If you just make Chi-Chi normal attack do a bajillion% damage, she can just kill every single enemy in the game in one stab. Would she be a really broken character? Yes, but is that how you want to buff the characters? Probably not. Is that the right way to buff the characters? Probably not. Does that fundamentally change why Chi-Chi sucks? It doesn't. You're just bandage fixing a problem by increasing a number. You're artificially putting a solution when you're not really addressing the character's problem. number is one thing, but I want to steer away from the idea of just increase her number, because I don't think it really is what we're looking for. That's like the main thing I want to put here. Okay, so I know we said we weren't going to talk about Dehya's problem, but I think there's one really important thing that I really should cover before we go into the buff. Dehya currently have a massive problem in terms of split identity. Dehya is neither a on-field or off-field characters. Dehya, it just does nothing. Dehya off-fields only migrate your damage by 50%, so it's not really enough to be a off-field defensive utility. You can't just rely on Dehya's damage migration passive to be a defensive utility. It doesn't work. And you're gonna eventually die if you just only use Dehya off-field. In order for Dehya to actually soak damage, to actually be a tank, you have to put Dehya on field. You have to let her take damage, which then she can later heal back up using her A4 passive. That's the real defensive mechanism from Dehya, not the shitty damage migration, because it doesn't work. But the problem is that Dehya on field sucks because she doesn't work well with off-field characters. She just grief with her power application, and she grief most of the meta off-field characters by just straight up not working with them. And talking about a character like Yalan, talking about a character like Xingqiu's. And this right here is the idea I was trying to present. So I made this video mostly for fun as a joke. It's like, it's not really fear crafting evidence that Dehya is worse than Air, because when you put Dehya with 3 off-field characters, she still doesn't work that well. You'll notice that I didn't put Dehya into team like Freeze team, Geo team, whatever people complaining about. It's because those teams already have an on-field character slot occupied. Like Geo team have Ito, who is taking the field time. Freeze team have Ayake, who's taking the field time. But the team that I put into this video mostly contain strong off-field characters, which is how you're actually going to put Dehya on field, right? In order to actually let Dehya take field time and tank damage, the rest of your party has to be filled with off-field characters, preferably strong off-field characters. But as you can kind of see in this video, Dehya just doesn't work well with off-field characters, mostly because she doesn't work with Xingqiu's, and Xingqiu's is just the single-handed most broken off-field character that every single team uses right now. But also the fact that even in team like Mono Pyro, her contribution just isn't enough to justify putting her on field. So that is the problem. That's what this video truly is trying to illustrate about, right? With that being said, how I like to change Dehya personally is that I actually is not opposed to the idea of tank. Again, I originally actually thought it was sucks, but after actually trying Dehya out, after playing Dehya, I do like the idea of MiHoYo trying to make Dehya as a tank to soak damage. Dehya is going to be the character that spends most of the field time in your party, which in return take most of the damage, and then you can either do something like increase her A4 passive a little bit to help her tank the damage better, maybe with some further damage reduction built into her kit. But in general, the idea is that Dehya should be the character dominating the field time, so that if the enemy are going to attack you and you're going to take damage, then Dehya should be the character who is going to receive the damage. In order for Dehya to be an on-field tank, there's a lot of things maybe not a lot of things, but there are a couple of things that they should change. The first and the most important buff that Dehya need is that she needs to work with off-field characters. If Dehya is gonna be an on-field tank character, she has to work with off-field characters. There's zero reason and excuse that she doesn't work with off-field character right now. And I'm talking about characters like Xingqiu's, Yalan, Beidou, whatever. This has to change no matter what. This have to change no matter what. The next thing is to introduce the grid mechanics to Dehya. Where basically the short version of that is that the more damage you take, you get some benefit based on the amount of damage you have taken. Either do more damage because you took more damage, or some kind of buff. Wait, so here's how it works. Every time he takes damage, he stores those damage as a secondary resource, which is what this white bar is. And then when he eventually casts his skills, he will turn those resources into a shield, but also increase his skill Haymaker damage. So this punch here will do more damage based on the amount of damage he has stored it in the past. And that will incentivize you to take damage, which I think is such an interesting mechanics. Incentivizing character to take damage is something we have not seen before, but it's perfectly fitting for the role of a tank, but also the role of Dehya, the theme of Dehya, right? So now you have a reason to actively not dodge the enemy attack. The damage you have taken can get converted to a resource, and then you can then later use that resource to do more damage or something like that. It incentivizes you to take damage because then you get benefit for taking damage. Now that's a real tank, right? We have seen secondary resource bar in the game already. Character like Alhaiham have a secondary resource bar, the mirror. Yeah, so Alhaiham has a mirror stacked mechanics, right? Where you can have 1 mirror, 2 mirror, 3 mirror. So we know miHoYo have the capability of displaying secondary resources in the form of stacks, right? So what you can do for Dehya is like, let's say every 10,000 damage you take is stored as a stacks. And then you can later expand those stack when you cast your elemental burst to do more damage or something like that. And of course, we also have Raiden Circle as a stacks mechanics, right? So miHoYo perfectly have a capability of displaying this information of a secondary resource to the players, and they can just create this secondary resource where it's based on the damage you have taken in the past, and then you just do something with it, right? Obviously, if you're gonna take damage, you definitely need a equivalent mechanism to prevent you from dying. It absolutely makes no sense that Dehya can die off field by the damage migration right now, so that definitely needs to change. But I think other than just changing her to heal more on her A4 so that you don't die by tanking, I think an interesting mechanics to tie up to the previous point would be the lower you are, the less damage you take. And you can kind of even utilize the secondary resource previously, right? The more, I'm just gonna call it grit because I don't know what resource. The more grit you have, the less damage you take. And when you eventually do want to expand your grit, you can convert all your grit into doing damage. Of course, you lose the benefit of taking less damage, but then you do a lot more damage. I think that would be an overall really interesting mechanism to do. I think one of the nicest part would be changing this to receive 60% less damage overall. It doesn't really make sense to me why this 60% is only from the red main blood passive rather than you just take 60% less damage overall. I don't even think it's that OP if you were to just take 60% less damage whenever you trigger the condition, which then further increase the playstyle, right? So imagine if this read, after you retrieve the field, you take 60% less damage. Then that encourages like a playstyle where you cast your elemental skill, and then cast your burst, which retrieve the field, take 60% less damage, and then you will redrop the field from your elemental burst. And then you cast E again to kind of reset the field to refresh the duration of this, and then take 60% less damage again. I think that's would be really nice to have. It also make her a lot smoother to play because then there's like a clear combo that you should try to go for. I don't really understand why they only did this for the damage from red main rather than just in general. It's not even gonna be ridiculously overpowered if they just make her take less damage, right? In my personal opinion, after seeing Dehya in the story quest, I think this kind of theme, it's kind of somewhat fitting in terms of her thematic as well. So in the story, Dangyaza employed Dehya as a mercenary / bodyguard to effectively protect her, right? And think about it, how does a bodyguard work? If an enemy is not generally you don't attack first as a bodyguard. Your only objective is to ensure that your employer is safe. And if an enemy is not aggressive to you, then you don't take action. But if an enemy start hitting you, then what you want to do first is to protect your employer. You want to tank those damage for your employer. You want to take those hits so that you can protect your employer. But as soon as the enemies are attacking you, now you have an incentive to be aggressive. You have to attack back, which is what you're gonna do with those damage you've taken, right? You start by protecting the people you care about, then you fight back to drive them away. And that mechanics is honestly perfectly on theme with Dehya, because that's what she is. She's a mercenary bodyguard for the like to see would be to just make her infusion a toggleable. I would like to say make her elemental burst a toggleable. Obviously, it's not something we have seen before, a toggleable elemental burst, but we do have kind of toggleable states in the past, kind of like how Chao elemental skill worked. When you click out elemental skill, you enter melee's form, and then when you click out again, you enter range form. I think it would be really cool to make Dehya elemental burst a toggleable. It kind of eliminate her energy issues by just making it a toggleable, which would be a pretty big buff, but there shouldn't be any reason for Dehya to have this massive energy issues. Honestly, she needed an energy recharge buff no matter what. Her elemental skill is actually unacceptable that it only generates 1 power energy every 2.5 seconds. And it's kind of like how Ramatra is in Overwatch. In Overwatch, there's this new tank called Ramatra. Ramatra has 2 forms. He has a range form and a melee form, which is how he actually tank. So he starts by going in the range form with his staff, and he kind of pew 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 at you. But he can choose to toggle into his tank form and become a melee fighter at any time, right? And it will make him take a lot less damage. And I think that would be a really cool mechanics to add to Genshin Impact, especially for a character like this. When you want to be defensive, you can be in your normal form, and you just use your sword to like parry enemy attack, take some damage. But when you do want to eventually be aggressive, you can toggle onto your elemental burst to become a punching, right? Because you want to punch people away. That's when you start going ham. That's when you start going aggressive. It's some general mechanics change. Again, like the thing that I would like to steer away from is just pure number buff. I don't like pure number buff, and they're not real buff, and they're not meaningful to talk about. Oh, just make her elemental burst do more damage. Would that be a buff? Yeah, but would it fundamentally address the characters? It's a band-aid fix. Oh, just make her elemental skill generate more energy. Same shit. Make her elemental skill apply more pyro frequently. Same shit. They're all just number buff. They're just like, make this character numbers bigger, so therefore it's better, because bigger number equals better. They're not interesting, and they're all really just band-aid fix. They don't fundamentally address how the character is being played, which is the problem. You can like agree, disagree, iterate on it a little bit more. And same for the people who are watching this on YouTube. They can comment below of what they think about this idea. Maybe they think this idea is absolutely garbage and it doesn't really change how Dehya is played and they should never ever do something like this. Then you can let me know, right? But it's fine. It's just opinion based. There's no right or wrong answer here. They're gonna fix the character of no impact. Oh, they're never actually gonna fix this. They're never. I'll tell you right now. The unfortunate sad truth that I'll 100% reinsure you is that they'll never fix Dehya. They're never gonna buff Dehya. Dehya is not gonna see buff. So anything we ever talk about is actually just pure copium. Any idea we toss out, any feedback we toss out, I'll tell you right now, MiHoYo don't care. I can almost ensure you that MiHoYo is not gonna buff Dehya, which is unfortunate. But we can hope, we can dream, we can cope in our bed with our imagination. What if, right? I guess we can talk about the hashtag fix Dehya and a little bit, but for the YouTube frog, that's gonna be it for how I would like Dehya to be fixed or changed. And again, let me know what you think. Comment below, like, comment, subscribe. You guys know it. Bye, YouTube frog.